Welcome, everybody, to the Seven Figure Seller podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have Aaron Hughes. Welcome, Aaron. How's it going?
Hey, what's going on, Gary? Good to be here. Long time
Yeah.
listener, first time caller. That's what we say in
Yeah.
Arkansas.
Awesome. Awesome. Great to have you. I'm calling from Japan. Where are you coming in from today?
I'm in Hyderabad, India, but from Arkansas in the States originally.
Excellent, excellent. I'm thrilled to have Aaron Hughes. He's a alumni speaker at Seven Figure Seller Summit. He's built multiple seven-figure brands, and now he's running Ecom Wallet agency. So really wanted to share with you Aaron's story and a lot of the systems and the overcoming a lot of e-commerce chaos challenges. And I know that I'm going through, and a lot of other sellers are going through as well. So he's really going to open up the playbook and also sharing some of the really cool systems that he's implementing as well. So Aaron, why don't you take us back? How did you get started in this whole journey of e-commerce?
Yeah, well, I'll give kind of maybe this is too much information or, too much of a 10,000 foot view, but I went to the University of Arkansas, which is basically like Walmart country. And so everyone essentially after college gets a job for Walmart or some vendor for Walmart. And like I went to the Sam Walton College of Business, and I love Walmart actually. Like I'm a big fan of their family and business and their legacy. But I've also been a guy like when everyone zigs, I zag. And so, for example, like jean shorts, Crocs, whatever it is, like I want to do whatever people are saying is not cool. Um, I
So
guess I'm like in trending in that.
what kind of hairstyle did you have growing up?
Well, nothing like too crazy. I mean, it did change over the years. I used to have wings, is what we called it, where I would like comb the wings out of, whatever. It's funny you say that. I don't know if I'm going through a midlife crisis, but I'm growing my hair out again. I used to have
Oh,
kind of like the shortcut.
okay. I thought you were gonna say
I'm
you had a
training.
mullet or something back in the day when everyone else had like a flat top
In,
fade or something. Yeah.
no, I mean, in college, I did have hair like down to here
Yeah.
for a season. But yeah, I'm training for a marathon and growing my hair out. So it's kind of a midlife crisis. But
Yeah.
in college, I had, like a spiritual experience. Like I'd grown up in a Christian home, but it was just kind of like a religion externally. I really just cared about partying and making money. And so I had a chance to work for Procter and Gamble and then made it to the final round of the interview and then basically didn't make it. And then through that ended up in another kind of summer internship that changed, I guess, like the trajectory that I was going on. And
Mm.
so after college, I actually was looking for more of like a almost like an NGO nonprofit type of deal where I could get some business experience, but also have some experience in third world countries with, kind of like social entrepreneurship. So how job creation can bring, dignity and jobs to people that, otherwise wouldn't have it. So
Mm.
I took a job with a, kind of like a friend connection who was sourcing products from China. And they sent me to India to basically try to build out a supply chain for them to source collegiate products there. So they sold, anything that they could put a college logo on. And so you can imagine it's a pretty wide spectrum of stuff.
Mhm.
And they were looking at India before that became like the big topic of, the whole COVID stuff. So I went to India and then took it. Like I was also working for a broader sourcing group, and so was building connections with suppliers in India because there was no. I mean, still today, not really like an Alibaba of India, and that's what got me into the sourcing game, which ultimately led me to like start my own. I started a leather company on the side, and that's when I kind of stumbled into the whole Amazon space. But that's kind of how I ended up in India, and I'm still here, doing stuff.
When did you go to India?
That was in July of 2014. I still remember showing up because all the international flights happened to show up in like the middle of the night. And I was like, I'm one of those guys who shoots from the hips. So I didn't really know much about India or Hyderabad. And I just showed up and I'm like, where am I? Like it felt like an alien world because they had this big government building shaped like a fish. And I
Yeah.
was like, what did I get myself into? But, luckily I stayed and, now I love it. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, talking about chaos and running your business, you mentioned you had your leather brand, selling it on
Yeah.
Amazon. What was the biggest chaos moment that made you realize you needed systems?
Well, it was actually, I learn a lot by asking questions to older and wiser people because, they've been down that road. So I can't remember who exactly turned me on to traction, but I think it was maybe like a group I was being mentored in. There was one ecom group I was in, and like all the owners were doing traction. And I was like, okay, what the heck is traction?
Yeah.
And so I started to read the book, and I liked it because I'm a big fan of like practicality. Um, and the book is just super practical because like each chapter you like do the work as you read the book. So we started Traction actually through my agency first, like 6+ years ago. Well, we were like a year into it when we started, so probably 5 years ago we started Traction. So me and my co-founder basically like sat down and we made all the steps of Traction, and I've been following it ever since, and some of the other like startups that we do. But that was really the clarity of like knowing, hey, these other business owners like were all where I was, and now they're all using Traction because
Mm.
it's helped it's really more about like the leadership team as opposed to just helping the owner. Like it helps get everyone on the same page.
Yeah, definitely. So talking about the leadership team, you mentioned that you and your co-founder were both visionaries without an integrator.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe you could kind of explain for people that are not familiar with those two terms are, what what is that exactly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that basically most business owners would fall into the visionary bucket. I would guesstimate. So most people probably listening to this are in that. Not always, but I would say majority of the time. And they're definitely like the smallest percentage of the population as a whole. Like very few people wake up one day and they're like, I want to start a business, um, or actually like make it through to start a business. Um, but the problem is the visionary is like the one who sees 10 years, 5 years down the road, and they're like running towards it.
Hmm.
But the majority of the population are what like we would consider generalists. And that's not like a negative term. There's kind of these different like personality tests you can take. And generalists are kind of like the majority of the people who are like, hey, they want a clearly defined task and they can execute it really well, but it's got to be defined. So when we started the company and started hiring people, people hated like working under us because everything was so ambiguous. It was like, hey, can I take vacation? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, if you have to, then sure, take it. Like, we didn't have any policies, anything written down. We were just kind of like starting and trying to figure it out as we went. And so our one of our early hires was a girl who's still with us today, who's kind of like our integrator. So she helped build. Basically, she takes the vision in my head and like makes it practical and like runs with it. And then I give input along the way. But most like ADHD business owners are really bad at putting things down and actually implementing things. So it's really important to find that person. If you're in same thing, if you're an integrator, you need a visionary. Otherwise, you just get, I've seen this a million times where they have like paralysis by analysis and they never do anything because they're all just like
Mm.
stuck in their own headspace.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's really important to have both of those people.
Yeah. So the
And there,
fact,
there,
yeah.
I
Hmm.
was going to say there are people who have both. Like I can technically do both if I wanted to, but the integration really drains me. So,
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
people who are technically could do both of them, but
Yeah, definitely. And with the fact that both you and your co-founder were both visionaries without that integrator, what mistakes did that personality mismatch create? And I mean, did it cost you money? Could you share more?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would say it just like we would just talk about random ideas and we would never actually do any of them. So I mean, I think it just
Hmm.
probably wasted time more than anything because it's like, I've just learned over the years that like, it's really best to just have two or three things that you're kind of focused on and then get those done before you talk about other things. Because we would have a list of like 20, 30 ideas, and it's like, obviously, we're not going to have time to do any of those.
Hmm.
So I think when visionaries get together, it's powerful because you can brainstorm and dream, but you've really got to boil it down to a few simple concepts to like, you know, break into quarterly goals and make those your team's objectives. Because if you share these big lofty ideas, most people get really stressed out and like anxious because they're like, how are we going to do that? So as a leader, I've found that I've had to be a little careful with not sharing all my ideas because, it can tend to create more like anxiety than excitement,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So let's kind of segue into the whole e-commerce chaos problem. Um, you said that entrepreneurs, they lie to themselves, they can do everything better and faster. What's the real cost of this, mindset for seven-figure sellers?
Well, so that's like the idea of like I can do it better or faster myself, which is why I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say this because most owners are, a lot of them can be perfectionists, and so they don't want to like offload anything on their plate off their plate. So what ends up happening is you don't scale, right? Like, do you really think that like Jeff Bezos is still doing the day-to-day in Amazon? It's like these people, like they learn how to hire good people who get stuff done. And even if I've always been told like, even if somebody can do something 80% of what you can do,
Yeah.
that's actually still better because you're always going to be stuck if you're waiting for someone to do it 100% better than you because,
Yeah.
you're really good at what you do and it might not be possible, but if you can get 80 plus percent, then you're doing pretty well actually.
Yeah.
And so the key becomes
Yeah.
creating good
It's funny you
systems
mentioned
and
that. I'm like I'm into like cooking, and then I once
mm,
sat in a like a cooking master class by that famous Michelin chef Jean-Georges, and he has restaurants in like Las
yeah,
Vegas, like Shanghai, Paris, Tokyo, and then during that class I asked him like how did you scale your business, right? I mean like you
yeah,
have like 30 different restaurants all over the world, you can't be everywhere at the same time, and then he shared one thing that was exactly what you said. He said when he trains one of his chefs in a new restaurant, when they can make the food like 80% of how he can make it, that's good enough. So he can let the
right.
reins go and let him or her just go with it. I think that's one of the keys to success. I mean, regardless if you're in e-com or food and beverage, etc. Right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you keep the key decisions on your plate, right? Like how he expands his restaurants, I'm sure he's doing that himself, but it's like yeah, end of the day, the person eating the food at the restaurant is not going to notice like that 10
Yeah.
plus percentage point difference probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. How about like, with your agency, when you're working with brands, what are some of the like maybe the top three operational disasters you see when you're evaluating like these big seven-figure, eight-figure brands?
Yeah, well, it's all the same story every time, right? So one of the funny things is like I'm not really an integrator, but I've had to learn to basically become that for clients we have because a lot of the brands we manage, it's the same type of owner dilemma that I've just described. Like they don't
Hmm.
have any project management tools, they don't have any systems. And so we essentially have to become that for them. And
Hmm.
that's what really was kind of eye-opening. There's like imposter syndrome where you think these big companies are so smart and fancier than you, but then you realize they're all run by people and people are all kind of the same. So like we all have big faults. We all think we know everything, but internally in these meetings, they're all discussing similar things to what, a small, tiny brand's discussing.
Hmm.
Um, so that was kind of eye-opening and also gave me more confidence of like, hey, you don't have to be like this, Michael Hyatt executive CEO. Like a lot of CEOs are kind of struggling with similar things of what you're struggling with.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, most owners just don't have good SOPs, standard operating procedures. They don't have project management boards to keep things organized. And so, they're just kind of constantly living in a state of kind of chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And how much time were you personally spending on low value tasks before implementing, traction in EOS, and what was that preventing you from focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning days, well, and there's kind of a double-edged sword because, having a bigger company in many ways is actually easier to run because you can delegate more things out. But yeah, in the early days, I did everything, which was definitely not
Mm.
sustainable. So I wasn't able to focus on like the high level, value things or growth because I was like writing copies, like doing keyword research and writing listings and because I definitely lived in the like I can do it better or faster myself like
Hmm.
zone. And so I would get frustrated easily, and it's like, oh, I'll just do it myself, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely cost us the ability to like grow faster and like me spend more time on kind of the vision of the company versus
Yeah.
just kind of like doing task.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like so you were growing the agency, you were like early days doing everything. It was kind of bottlenecking the company from growing faster. When did you finally, have that aha moment and what did that look like?
Yeah, I so we started doing traction like a year into the agency, and I'll go ahead and like be forthcoming and admit like I'm not an EOS implementer. There's like a lot of guys who get paid thousands of dollars to like come in and help you implement EOS. So
Hmm.
we're not like totally 100% doing everything according to what they would say.
Hmm.
We've kind of adapted it to our needs, but it fits our company. So it took us probably about a year or two to really get everyone on board with it. And so now it's nice because the one good thing about it is it creates the same vocabulary also in the same structure. So everyone knows what to expect in a quarterly meeting, in a level 10 weekly meeting. Um, and so there's not like just constant re-educating on what we're talking about because it's like, okay, everyone knows what a rock is. They all know what the quarterly planning looks like, what the annual planning. And so there's not like any surprises. So
Hmm.
it probably took us a year or two just to get all that stuff really like where it's like second nature.
Okay. So let's take a look at that a little more. You mentioned level 10 meetings. Can you walk us through like what does a level 10 meeting look like for an ecom brand and give us an example of an issue that got surfaced and solved?
Yeah. So again, our level 10s are definitely a little different than like what the, you know, I guess textbook answer is, but a level 10 basically, so in traction, there's different processes and parts of the process that you'll work through, which is, and we'll probably break some of these down later,
Yeah.
but you first go through like the vision, people, data, issues process, and then traction is kind of like the check-in part where you've got a weekly meeting, which is called the level 10. You've got
Hmm.
your quarterly planning and your annual planning. And then the level 10 is really kind of like the C-suite or the leaders where you walk through um, the different parts. So we start out our meeting with kind of like employee client issues. First, we talk about the employee aspect of like, hey, what hiring is in our pipeline? What needs do we have? Then we talk about like employee issues where, hey, this person's not performing, or, this person's going to go on maternity leave, and how do we plan for that? And then we talk about client updates and issues. So what client issues are we seeing? We have like a part of traction is the data. So we have a spreadsheet with all of our client success scores each week, which is kind of like an internally rated thing. Once we go through the client updates, also if there's like new client onboarding, um, then we go through we use Asana, so that's where like our management stuff sits. So then
Hmm.
we go through our to-do list, which is like a weekly thing, which is updated in our level 10. Anything completed gets checked off. Anything not completed gets pushed to the next week. And then we go through our issues lists. And so we try to like ideate and solve like any issues going on. And then we have our quarterly rock check-in. So each rock is kind of assigned to a different manager, and then they're supposed to give like a status report on that quarterly objective. Um, and then well, I forgot to. In the very beginning, we do like a just a personal check-in. There is a lot of like just updates on. So it's not just all business. There's like some updates in there, but
Hmm.
that's kind of like what a typical level 10 is. We talk about what we're going to be doing the rest of the week, and then we meet the following week and kind of check in.
Okay. And would this work for like a smaller e-commerce brand? Like let's say, a lot of people only have
Yeah.
like a VA or they have some remote workers. Like would it work for that type of e-commerce brand?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the same like skeleton. It's just you adapt it based on your business, right? So let's say like even for my ecom brands, we kind of do a similar thing where, but instead of talking about, we would spend less time. Obviously, we don't talk about client issues. We talk about like product issues or customer complaints that are happening.
Hmm.
Um, how do we solve that with the manufacturer? Then we would have a section talking about product development. Hey, what products do we have in the pipeline? Who's going to, and some of those would be quarterly rocks. It just depends. Um, and then maybe adding a new marketplace, like, hey, one of our goals is to get set up on TikTok Shop.
Mm.
How's that going? And so it's like you're just adapting the playbook based on like what your needs are. But you could literally do this with yourself. You don't even need another person. But I think even if you don't want to have like if you have one VA, I would still, as a single business owner, implement this into my business because once you set up the system,
Mm.
every new hire is going to be hired into the system. But it's really hard to hire people into a chaos system and then try to later adapt it for traction. So that's
Mm.
why I would recommend, doing it. And you don't have to be super like, you know, anal about just, hey, we're going to do this if you're by yourself. But I would say getting familiar with the system so that when people are there would be important to set up.
Yeah, definitely. And you had mentioned in terms of why EOS matters for e-commerce. Um, could you give an example of, hey, after implementing EOS, I was able to achieve X that I wasn't able to do before?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because all of our businesses start out with traction. So I don't have like a once we did this, we grew 50% stat.
Okay.
But obviously, our business continues to grow because I think of the structure of having EOS. Because I think what happens, like I guess with my leather company, I didn't really have a plan for launching new products, and so I definitely saw like stagnant growth because
Mm.
certain products you'll kind of hit like a saturation level.
Hmm.
So for me, that's a big part of planning and having these leadership meetings is having a roadmap of how you're going to keep growing the business. Because if
Yeah.
you stop focusing on that and you're just putting out fires, then you're not going to see your top line continue to grow year over year. You're going to see like start to see like a decline in that. But it also just helps ecom brands get everyone on the same page. So like your designer should not just be on an island just creating designs when you want. Like you should have your team know what's going on in the big picture,
Mm.
because it just helps create like buy-in, to the process too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that in my business I could be doing better, just like having the big picture and also buy in because sometimes I'm just like, hey, I have this idea and let's go do it. Right? And oh,
Yeah,
let's try out that. And we're kind of like running, a lot of times we're running in like different directions. So we're not really getting the ROI that we should be getting. So
yeah.
yeah.
One of the things too I added to our vision traction organizer too was just like why we exist statement. And
Hmm.
so and that can be adapted to like so like look, I own a pet brand, and so we want to be like the best dog treat business out there, like healthiest ingredients. And so then that becomes the filtering question for any decision we make. And
Mm.
so if we're like talking about designing an maybe a dog related product, but it's not necessarily like treat related, we can kind of filter decisions through like, hey, does this go back to like our why we exist of like helping dogs eat healthier? Um, and so that also is helpful for making decisions is when you have everything ironed out of like where you're going, then you can
Yeah.
filter like ideas through that too.
Yeah.
'Cause it still might make sense because it's like it's synergistic, but it also might be a distraction, from our overall kind of brand strategy.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So let's dive a little deeper into the different EOS components. So I think you just talked about vision, right? Having like defining
Yeah.
and sharing a clear company vision to align the team. What is a I mean, for someone that's never heard of EOS, can you explain the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, why it's the starting point for e-commerce businesses?
Yeah. So basically the VTO, which is the Vision Traction Organizer, like you said, it's essentially replacing kind of like this, I don't want to say like archaic idea of a business plan, but the reality for most business plans is like people make these like 5 to 10 page documents and no one ever looks at it again.
Right.
So it's not super like helpful or practical for like 5 years down the road when you're not. So the VTO is meant to be something that you reflect on often, especially, I mean, at least every quarter. Like part of the quarterly planning in Traction is like you spend 30 minutes to, I think it's like 2 hours is what they recommend, like reviewing and going through the VTO to make sure that everything's like still like everyone's still on board with like what's where we're headed.
Hmm.
Um, and so the VTO, like we actually use like a Google sheet to put ours. Like we've got it mapped out where we've got. I mean, there's a lot of different components to it, but end of the day, you also have things like your company values on it. You have like your kind of 1, 3, and 10 year picture, like where you want to be in those time frames. And
Hmm.
obviously, you update the VTO once you meet those milestones. Um, but it's been helpful for us and our management team just for them to understand like where I see our company at in 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, so, uh, and you've also got things like your marketing strategy, like what's your kind of unique selling proposition that you can that whether you're an agency or a brand, like what makes you different. And so it's just helpful to plan out, like especially in the starting stages, like how you're going to be different. Because
Right.
a lot of people, I think, on Amazon are just focused on they're just focused on like what hack can I do, how can I knock off this product, and that's not really like how you make a business, to be honest.
Right.
I mean, those are all cool things to learn, but the businesses that like scale and exit are the ones who have an actual like plan.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's like before you could be really lucky and you could make it big on Amazon, but now with the tariffs and with the higher fees, I mean, it's not you got to treat it as a real business, right? That's why I wanted
Yep.
to bring you on. One of the reasons why, I mean, because of the fact that successful brands they're implementing this, and you were able to exit one of your brands, doing
Yeah.
this, right?
Mhm.
So, okay, okay, excellent. Can we talk about people next? I mean, you mentioned the right people are in the right seats. How do you decide on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So, okay, I have a really good team that does a lot of our hiring and filtering. So that's part of that. Like I'm in the wrong seat if I'm the one who's like trying to post jobs and like interview people. I
Yep.
learned that pretty quickly that I kind of cause more chaos
Mm,
or more issues in that process. But basically, the right people in the right seat just means like look at like we've got an accountability chart, kind of similar to like an org chart, but it lines out each position and who's doing what and
mm,
what those responsibilities are. I think
mm,
that's important because it clearly defines, what people's roles and responsibilities are.
mm,
But you might hire someone, like for example, we had someone we brought on to be our like content team leader, and quickly found out that like they're just a very gifted, like also kind of integrator skill set,
mm,
and so they ended up moving into more of like a organizational like optimization role. And so which really helped free up a lot of my time. But it's like just recognizing what people's gifts are,
mm,
um, and then putting them in the seat to thrive. Because I think a lot of people fall into this like manager trap where like say you're a really good designer and then the next step up the ladder is to like be a manager of people and not design, which in turn may not be that person's strong suit.
mm,
Um, so a really good leader is someone who like explains to someone like where their gifting is and how this role is helping them carry out their gifting. Because sometimes we do have people who are kind of disappointed that they didn't get like a certain manager role.
mm.
But it's explaining to them, hey, just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're not going to be able to still make X money or do certain things, but this is where your gifting is over here and not necessarily,
Mm.
managing a team, because this is why this would frustrate you and all that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Okay. And what about with the data? What are the 3 to 5 key metrics that every seven-figure ecom brand should track weekly, and how do you turn those into a scorecard?
Yeah, so the idea of a scorecard is basically like it's a weekly metric that it can be also daily that you fill out and check over with kind of like either you or your COO or whoever. Um, but I will say this is probably the biggest area that I struggle with because I'm not perfect in all these things. And the hard part about the data is just like honestly, it's just collecting the data like can be frustrating or things that I forget to do. And so what I've seen is just narrowing it down to a few key metrics instead of trying to have like 50 things that you're trying to fill out, because then it just becomes this burden instead of this like pulse on how the business is doing. But I think what even multiple departments you have, it's important to have like the idea of like these like lead and lag metrics. And so some metrics are going to be lag metrics, which is basically like, hey, what were my sales this month or whatever. But um, so even in sales and marketing, like lead metrics can be like, hey, how many calls did my sales guy make? How many appointments did we have? How many did we close? So just finding out whatever the metrics are
Hmm.
um, is important, and then making it an easy system to check in. And you can have a VA fill out the scorecards, but with ecom brands, obviously you're going to track all your top level data, sales, ad spend, those types of things, and you're going to check it on kind of a daily, monthly, weekly average of like what our growth is.
Hmm.
Um, and then you could even track like, hey, how many product launches did we have each month? Like, is our goal to launch one product a month? And then you're putting those key decisions on a scorecard so that you can check to see,
Hmm.
if you're on track or not.
Okay. And what about issues? Like how do you guys identify issues, and can you explain the difference between do's and rocks?
Yeah, so with traction, like the issue section, basically their method for solving issues is that they call it the IDS, which is like identify the problem, discuss with your team, like, what the problem is and how to fix it. And then the last one is like solve, like what is the actual takeaway from this issue? And then that's when you turn it into either like a to-do item or a quarterly rock based on like how long it's going to take to solve. But let's say, for example, you're getting like one of our products is well, I think I actually, yeah, I think I have uh one of the samples right here.
Hmm.
So one of our products is like this little like bourbon cup,
Hmm.
and we were getting some negative feedback that it was too small, like our pictures apparently like made it look slightly bigger.
Hmm.
um and then we were getting some returns, and so we had that like frequently return badge. And
Hmm.
so we had an IDS meeting, like an issue meeting on addressing that feedback, and then discussing like what are our solutions. We either make the cup bigger, or we change the pictures, or we do both.
Hmm.
And so then I talked to my manufacturer about the options, and so we ended up we changed the pictures for the immediate cause, but then we also decided to tweak the product, like make it bigger, and then also add like a charring inside, because we noticed some competitors um, had that differentiator between our product and theirs. And so we just basically tweaked the product, but it was like through the IDS meeting that we came up with the solution, and then turned it into like kind of like a goal basically that we would get accomplished for the quarter.
Excellent. And after that, I see that process is the next step, and process is obviously huge for ecom. What's the first SOP, standard operating procedure, that you recommend creating, and how do you get your team to actually follow it?
Well, the good thing is with AI now, you can make SOPs relatively easy, because I think the hard part for a lot of people is just starting an SOP, like getting the blank page to like instructions.
Hmm.
And so, excuse me, I use AI to basically start every single document I do, and then I go back through and add obviously like the finishing touches.
Hmm.
Um, we're also building. We hired like um, an innate in specialist, like an AI agent specialist, to help
Mm.
build some stuff for us, because we do have problems sometimes of like we have SOPs, but then people don't use them. And so
Yeah.
we're trying to create like kind of our own internal chat bot to make it easy for to folks to like find the SOP and actually like use it. Um,
Mm.
so that is a struggle, but I mean, at the very least, it still needs to be documented, because then you can make a rule where it's like no one can ask you a question unless you ask that, like, hey, have you looked at the SOP? If they say no, they're not supposed to come, ask you. And so having little things like that where you're kind of pushing people to check those things.
Okay. And I see the last step is traction. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with the meeting. So you've got like your level 10 meetings, your quarterly and like annual planning.
Hmm.
And the cool thing is traction literally. tells you step by step how to run those meetings. And so I think for people like me, like I never had a job in corporate. After college, I basically either worked for a small business or I've worked for myself. And so I
Mhm.
think for people like that, there's probably not a lot of exposure to like how do you run a really good meeting.
Yeah.
And there's good, books and resources on that. But Traction just makes it super simple of like, okay, spend 30 minutes on this, then you spend 30 minutes on this. So for
Mm.
someone like me, it's super helpful to like have that playbook of how to run a meeting and then making sure you schedule it in stone because it's really easy to like want to push meetings of like, oh, we'll do it next week. But you really have to get into the habit of like, no, we're doing the level 10 no
Yeah.
matter what.
Yeah.
And one of the cool benefits is like if I'm on vacation, the level 10 meeting is so like exact every week that like anyone in our management team knows how to lead it because it's so simple. So that's the
Mhm.
other really good benefit is like it's simple, it's reproducible. And so even if you're not there, it'll still go on as
Mhm.
normal.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay. Let's move on to talk about implementing EOS in your ecom business. How, if someone's interested, how do they get started?
Yeah, well, I mean, the easy part is like you just buy the book and you read it.
Hmm.
So each chapter basically gives you homework.
Hmm.
And so, as you read the book is when and you could do, even if you're like 5 years in or just getting started, it's all the same.
Yeah.
Basically, like you'll have more context if you're already in your business of like setting this stuff up.
Hmm.
But you can still do this at any part of where you are, like with your business. But that's pretty much it. I mean, once you set up stuff up, you set up your VTO and get your meetings set up.
Hmm.
And there's also a book called Rocket Fuel that's meant for like the C-suite to get on the same page. That's a really good book if you already have like a leadership team. They could
Hmm.
read Rocket Fuel and then have a better understanding of like what you're trying to implement.
Okay. And what if you're a visionary? I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs are like, how do you find the right complement to your personality?
Well, do you mean like so like if you're a visionary, how do you actually set up like your VTO and stuff, or do you mean like finding
I
the
mean,
integrator?
yeah. I mean, in terms of finding an integrator, is it necessary that, hey, I either have to have like a co-founder that's an integrator, or should I hire someone that's an integrator, or like what would you suggest to
Yeah.
implement
So
EOS?
it's definitely not like I wouldn't say it's a necessity, but I think in terms of long-term scale and sustainability, it'll be a necessity. But like in the early days, we bootstrap, right? So like we didn't
Hmm.
have tons of money to go hire some fancy person. But I think if you don't have a co-founder, it's just as easy to hire. Like it's integrators, I would say, are more common. Well, I don't want to, that comes off in the wrong way, but I think there's more people out there who have that personality of like a type A, get things done and implemented. And so you can always find someone to kind of be your right hand person to get stuff done.
Hmm.
But I don't think you need to feel pressure like in the beginning if you're bootstrapping to like necessarily do that from day one.
Hmm.
As long as you're able and willing, like I said, I did a lot of it in the beginning. It just wasn't fun for me, right? So like I wouldn't be doing that now. So I just think at some point you need to have that on your map, whether it's like an annual goal or something of like we're going to find someone to kind of step into this integrator role.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So, all right, we're already over time. So wrapping up, what if we were to summarize everything, I mean, condense everything that we covered today and apply the 80/20 rule, what would be the number one recommendation for sellers out there?
Well, I didn't really talk about this much, but another thing on top of traction that's been helpful for me is like having a group of people that are business owners that I can kind of like process things with. Because being a business owner is like a lonely road.
Yes.
So I think reading traction is the like obvious takeaway of like you just start like one thing at a time and put one foot in front of the other. So read
Hmm.
traction and then try to find people who are already doing this so that you can like buy them a cup of coffee and just say, hey, I didn't understand this or I'm having trouble with this. So I think, having mentors has been like a huge part of my journey.
Hmm.
And so you need to find someone who's a mentor and, be willing to like sacrifice to you want to obviously go around their schedule and like, hey, can I buy you coffee? Can we meet virtually? Can we do this and really soak up wisdom from other people who've been there before?
How do you find a mentor, or how did you find your mentor?
Okay, that's probably the hard part. So one of my superpowers is networking, and so like I love meeting people, talking to people, and I just happen to have like a really good network in Arkansas.
Hmm.
So for me, it's like probably easier,
Hmm.
than other people than to find someone. But I think even maybe through EOS, there's probably networks and communities out there. There's also a lot of implementers in EOS that you could find and ask, like, hey, are there other business owners? And there's a lot of just like general business networking groups you could join. But I just prefer to work through like my own network to find people that I have like crossover with to work with. But I also have a really good friend who does like CEO like executive coaching. It's not cheap,
Hmm.
but it's a really really good service. And at some point you got to really invest like in your own growth as a leader.
Yeah, definitely. All right. And for people that want to learn more and connect with you, Aaron, what's the best way?
Well, I like networking, like I said. So my email is aaron@ecommercewallet.co. And I think, Gary, you can share that. But just feel free to shoot me an email if anyone has questions. I like helping folks. So, reach out and say hi, if this resonated with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Aaron. This has been a masterclass in EOS and kind of organizing the whole chaos of running an e-commerce brand. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else did too. And we will see you guys at the next session. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. See ya.